Okay, so an example of what I'm talking about would be take up the issue of mayoral control, for example. Some folks will look at mayoral control completely through the lens of race, right? And they'll say that this is a racist governance policy that is imposed on communities of color. White communities, suburban communities get to have democratic governance of their schools, and poor urban communities don't, and therefore mayoral control is a racist policy. Some people will look at it through that lens and then all the way to the other end of the spectrum. I think that we can have discussions about mayoral control all across that spectrum and still find common ground in terms of why mayoral control is not a good idea, why it hurts our students, why it disproportionately hurts communities of color, why it's particularly used in communities of color and not in other communities, and how it impacts our profession and educators from the trade union perspective. So finding the intersection of plank 1 and plank 5 on these specific issues is sort of what the goal is for these breakout groups today. Another example could be tenure, which seems like a largely trade union issue, right? Which seems like a working condition, workers' protection issue. But you can take it to the other side of the spectrum and look at things like TFA and see this move toward getting rid of tenure, towards having more inexperienced educators, but that's being imposed in largely communities of color in urban areas. Suburban communities, largely white communities, largely affluent communities are not experiencing that trend, and they wouldn't accept it for their children. So whether you want to look at it from the perspective that this is something that hurts our profession and it's a trade union issue, or whether you want to go to the other side of the spectrum and look at it as a policy that's racist, we don't need to get so caught up in that, although I think it's important to have that conversation and to name it both ways. But as a caucus, what we can do is find that middle ground and examine these policies on that full spectrum and come to a consensus about how we can move forward and take action on them. So is that clear, sort of what the goal of this breakout group is today? So you're going to have a conversation around what is social justice unionism, and just as a quick primer, rank and file led, partnering, really organically partnering with independent community organizations, parent organizations, and other unions, and fighting for social, racial, and economic justice. That's really the essence of what social justice unionism is. And so with that lens, with our broad lens, let's move forward with this conversation. So we're going to break into 5 groups, and John has the handouts of this.